Yo. Episode 36 of Room 9 is here. But before I introduce this episode, this is a friendly reminder to get on room9podcast.com and, damn it, fill out a contact form. Send us a message. Give us a topic you want to hear. Give us a guest you want to hear. I know you guys, right when you hear me say this, when I say, let us know a guest you would like to hear on here, or at least attempt to get on here. I know somebody rings in your head. Maybe you want to come on. Fill out a contact page. Email me at seancudahy@room9podcast.com. Do something. Let me know what's up, what you guys want to see happen in here. I know you're out there. I know you're listening. Do it. You can also help out Room 9 by sharing all our social media pages, liking us on Facebook at Room 9 Podcast, checking out our stuff. If you want to help out even more, you can help out monetarily with room9podcast.com/support page. You can give one time, you can give monthly, and that is something that would help us out greatly, especially with the technical issues we've been having. Trying to get a new audio interface is the next purchase. It has been cutting out on me. I believe it was the reason that the episode with Janet Gaskin got ruined, which is being rescheduled as we speak. And it's the reason why I've done 2 episodes now since the Janet Gaskin and failure. And it's just, I've had issue after issue after issue, and I have come to the conclusion that is my audio interface. So that's on the list of necessities for Room 9. So, episode 36, I sit down with an incredibly awesome, beautiful human being, Brittany Bennett. She is a licensed mental health counselor. She is the sole proprietor of her own business as well, and her business is Bridge Over Troubled Water. If you would like to check out her services, what she offers, she does a bunch of different good stuff. Her website is botwservices.com. That's botwservices.com, and you can check out what she has to offer. She's got a lot going on. She is an amazing person. We kind of get into a little bit of the benefits of mindfulness and helping you sleep. We get into discussions on the importance of communications and relationships. Talk a little bit about the stigma of why it's okay to go to a primary physician about a physiological issue, but when you have a psychological issue, you almost look weak. And there's a lot of awesome things. We get a little bit on language and the language we use. So much good stuff throughout this episode. I hope you guys enjoy it. Despite the technical difficulties I had, this episode came out pretty well. So, without further ado, Room 9, episode 36, Brittany Bennett. Enjoy, and I love you guys. As always, I have to end with that. All right, peace out.
Wait a minute. You're Sean Cudahy. Oh, you better believe it. How you gonna know? Think about that one. You're Sean Cudahy. That's the whole thing. That's what separates us. Yeah, things have changed. It's ridiculous. Because you've been listening to morons for so long. I don't know what's gonna happen, but I don't know what's gonna happen. Wait a minute. You're Sean Cudahy. Wait a minute. You're Sean Cudahy.
Do you have it timed out?
It seems like that's what it is.
All right, sweet. Yeah, so I've had nothing but frustration with my sound recording recently. It's tough because trying to figure out, narrowing down what the problem is. There's so many possibilities of what the problem is why the recording goes bad sometimes, and
Okay.
it's such a pain in the ass to try to narrow it down. What is it? Why is it? So you have to turn on certain things and hit record, turn off certain things, and probably spent 20 hours this past weekend trying to figure it out.
That's really too bad.
So yeah, I don't know exactly what I did, but I'm seeing I had it running with a podcast playing on my phone the other day, just into the microphone
Mm-hmm.
and let it go for like an hour, 2 hours, and nothing happened. So
Really?
it seemed good.
So that's good then.
So hopefully.
I
So if
hope
you
so.
catch me glancing over at this computer a little more
Oh, yeah, you're fine. Do whatever you got to do.
too often, I'm paying attention. I'm just making sure our conversation is still getting recorded
Sure.
because it's a pain in the ass. But yes, Brittany Bennett, right?
That's correct, yeah.
Yes. Well, thank you for inviting me to your room.
No, thank you for having me.
I love it. Yeah, I seen the BU on your video online.
When you told me that, I said I should really update the website. It's been a little while. It's been around for a few years. I think it's time for me to take a look again and maybe make some slight
And
adjustments.
redo the video.
I would. The sound quality isn't as great as I would like it to be.
Mm-hmm.
Just a few little tweaks here and there. And, as time goes on, it's been 3 years, I think to myself, there's probably some things that I'd like to update.
I was thinking about like how I could do that because on Adobe, this program I'd use to edit audio, it's easy to switch it over to the video. And I was like, I wonder, I could probably get paid good money to do that for people.
That could be.
Like record the audio and then just add it to the video, but I'm getting way ahead of myself.
Yeah, but there's so many opportunities with that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's endless. It just depends on whether or not you want to do it and your availability, I guess.
It is, everything is time, isn't it? Everything
certainly is.
Unfortunately revolved around time. If we could teach ourselves everything. I mean, I've spent, I don't know how many hours, because I knew nothing when I started the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And I spent many hours trying to just teach myself, watching videos, reading articles on how to edit, how to
Sure.
use effects. And I got a grip. I was using a free program like I was telling you about if you start one,
Yep.
there's free programs out there. And then I switched over to the Adobe one, which is a paid program. And so with this free program, I'm like, all right, I'm getting the hang of this. I got this. I'm getting to know stuff. And then I got this paid program, like, oh my God, I don't know anything.
It's so different. What's helpful is if they do like those online tutorials where you can like follow along. You look at that on your phone, but have your equipment up and then try to do something yourself.
Adobe's awesome because they make it very easy to learn, and they will actually have like stuff pop up on the app. So you want to
like a
learn how
guide.
to add a compression effect or something. It
Oh, that's
says
great.
you go here, click here, do this. These buttons do this. So yeah, they really make it easy for you to learn,
That's nice.
which is awesome. But I mean, everything is kind of becoming like that now, though.
Everything's right at our fingertips most
Yep.
of the time.
Yep. And again, it just comes down to time.
Yep.
If you have the time, you can learn it.
Time and commitment. But then even if you do learn it, then you have to actually retain it. And then sometimes that takes up even more time.
Oh, it always
and
is taking
everything's
time.
always ever changing. So you learn one thing and then they're already updating
Next
it.
thing you know, yeah, you don't know it anymore.
It is the truth in some cases.
Oh my gosh. So you are a licensed mental health counselor, correct?
Yes, that is correct. There's so many different credentials, aren't there? It
Oh
can be
my
hard to
gosh.
differentiate them, but I'm what's called the LMHC, or the licensed mental health counselor. My training really, focuses on the different type of therapies that there are to utilize in conjunction with mental health diagnoses. So I mean, there's psychologists, there's social workers, licensed mental health counselors, and
Oh, the
we're
list
kind of
goes on.
grouped under the umbrella, but we all do have some variation to some degree. No pun intended.
But yeah, there is a lot. Like I'm trying to memorize them. Speaking of retaining certain things, I'm just like, oh my gosh, what does this stand for again? Okay, yeah,
Yep,
that's
exactly.
that. The KSAC one, I see a lot of, obviously
Yes.
being revolved more around substance use.
Mm-hmm.
That is it. But you said you started yours, not an internship wouldn't be the word, but the hours you had to get in. What is the
Correct.
term for that?
Well, so their internship is before you get your degree. That's
Okay.
when you're learning, when you're in training, and then once you get your degree, then for social workers and licensed mental health counselors, for example, when you get your first job in a clinic, if you will, or wherever you're going to be performing your work and quote unquote practicing, you're practicing to obtain your hours over time. So for a licensed mental health counselor, you have to do so many hours face to face working with your clients before you can get the go to get your license. So you have to
Okay.
get your hours, and then you have to pass your national exam, and then once you get both those things, then you're good to go.
Then you're good.
That's for the LMHC. It varies a little bit differently per credential, but that's what
Okay.
it was for me.
And you can get, so there's different types of
And some take longer than others.
yeah, I assume that. Yeah. I mean, I'm just doing the peer advocate recovery coaching thing
great. That's
for New York
excellent.
State. And there's so many different ones of those too. You can get the family,
sure
the
there is.
provisional, and I mean, they go all over the place. Half the time I feel like it's just to make money.
Yep. And you know what, though? That's such a great point because that's when it gets really challenging with sometimes people find themselves debating, should I do this because there is more money in this one? But at the end of the day, there's so much variation and so much to choose from that you might as well just choose the one that you want to do because you can still have opportunities once you get the degree that best suits you, I think is what it comes down to. You know, I looked at the degrees between social work and licensed mental health counselor, and I read the curriculum. I went on to some local colleges that stood out to me, read the curriculum, compared the curriculum, and I just felt that the LMHC was meant for me and my lifestyle at the time. But then when I got it, well, I should say when I chose which degree I wanted, the mental health counseling, at the time that I was looking at colleges that offered the degree, you could actually choose to have mental health counseling and a school counseling degree combined. And then once I graduated with my bachelor's, they took that away, and you had to actually do them separate. There was no option to do them combined anymore.
Oh, of course.
So I felt kind of left out on that. And then I thought, well, I'd really like to be specializing in marriage and family therapy as well, but it's a whole separate license.
Oh,
They're
my
the
gosh.
LMFT, not to confuse you anymore.
Oh, my gosh.
But point being, there's so many different things to choose from. So I think I just kind of remind myself, what do I identify with most? Because if I'm doing what I love to do, then I'll never question it at the end of the
That's
the
very
day.
true. And that's kind of what I've learned the hard way. And that's why I'm almost 34, finally doing something I love to do, because I couldn't stand going to work. I always had that like burning like emptiness and fire inside of me when I would go like work in a kitchen, which I love cooking, but it just didn't do it for me. Even when I got into fine dining, I just could not deal with it anyway. Like I always felt like, oh my God, what am I doing with my life? I'm too smart to be doing something like this. I don't understand. And not that dumb people just work in kitchens, or
Right.
I was also cutting area rugs because I thought, oh, maybe if I change the hours up and I'm working Monday through Friday and have paid vacations, maybe that's it. And it was still, I was doing this stuff. I'm like, what is going on? Like I need to do something else with my life. And I just knew it had something to do with helping and working with people.
That's really well said, and I can't help but think that the way that you just described that whole transition of, feeling like, oh, I'm 34, what am I doing with my life? I don't want to be doing the cooking the whole time. I think that really kind of, showcases and comes down to, like you said, the age of 34, and I thought to myself, that sounds so young to me that you would be questioning that, which also says a lot about you and your character and the pressure that maybe, whether it's you put on yourself or society puts on us as people, to start questioning, what am I doing? And I think to myself, 34, who's to say that that's too old or too
social
young,
institutions will do that.
Yeah, well, and that's another thing too. The pressures of society and friends and family and our own self, it kind of dictates how we feel, which is really, really unfortunate. And I think it's unfortunate that you felt that way, and I think that so many people can identify with the way that
Oh my gosh, yes.
that you felt then and maybe even feel now.
Well, so many people do that. One of my favorite philosophers always talks about life, being a game. And he always says from the day you're pretty much well born, you're pressured to walk. Like my kid's going to walk before you're your kid. And it just starts. And then you get into junior high, and then you graduate high school and you get your degree. Then you have to go to college and you get that degree. Then you work your way up the ladder in this big company. And then you get to the top floor and you're the CEO, and you realize you feel no different than you did before.
Isn't that the truth? The one thing that I wish that we as people could spend more time on is, I always say, why can't we as a society think of education differently? Like, and trust me, okay, I don't want to talk about politics. I don't want to reference politics. But what I do want to say is, when I hear education, I think to myself, why are we missing the mark? Why aren't we starting as young as elementary school, doing weekly field trips to different places, hospitals, restaurants, hotels, aquariums, zoos? I mean, you name it. It should be weekly field trips, and children should naturally be able to identify, or I should say the parents and teachers, those that are responsible for monitoring these kids, should be able to say, you know what, I saw so-and-so, they every week they gravitate towards going to this hotel or this library or something like that. I think the sooner we can implement exposing ourselves to anything with no judgment or no expectation, that we as people can develop a purpose sooner on in life and know what it is that we might be interested in as we get older. I just wish that could happen more often.
I couldn't agree more. It drives me nuts. And I think a lot of other people get these grandiose ideas of like, I want to be a rock star or a movie star. I mean, I have a good buddy of mine who has felt like that, and he just got out of electrician school. Yep. And he's like, I love it. I love my job. I love tinkering with little things, figuring out problems. Like, there's so many things out there, a farmer or whatever it is, that people will could end up loving to do.
That's so true. You got to be open to it. You got to try it. And you know what, too? I'm just going to throw this out there. Buffalo is an up-and-coming place for movies and theater, and you can see that there's local listings in the local news on television, on the websites, on the buffalonews.com. They list all those local movies coming up that you can apply to with having no background, and that can be your foundation for building a resume, even if it's on occasion work. It doesn't mean you have to do it long term, but how fun would that be?
Oh, that'd be great. I mean, and yeah, I think that's awesome. And
best of both worlds, right?
You're still able to somewhat afford living somewhere
Correct.
in the city, because you go to like LA or New York City, you can't do that. Even if you were making good, decent money in this city compared to there, you wouldn't even be able to survive. So it is an awesome opportunities I think are happening in this city.
Agreed.
Which is cool. Which, I mean, I guess I'm a great example of it too, because there really are no kind of podcasts, especially centered around substance use, that are up and coming at all. There's like nothing.
Isn't that amazing? And it's been around for a very, very long time.
Yeah, it has. And yeah, I've looked around on the country, there's very few halfway decent podcasts, which I can't believe, because you'd be hard pressed to find one person that has not been at least affected one way, shape, or form by substance use disorder.
That's so true. As unfortunate as that is, it is dead on.
Do you deal with a lot now? I know you said you started off in Horizons, but do you get a lot of people in your company, your practice?
You know what's interesting is, and this goes to me being in private practice, when you're in private practice, you have a little bit more of an option to pull in the type of clientele that you think you would best work with and that you would best fit with. And for me, what I found that I really love to do is to work with loved ones who have a loved one that's experiencing addiction and or mental health condition. Because so often the family members themselves either are not educating themselves by choice, are not aware of the resources available to them to educate themselves, or are not ready to educate themselves. So I think that a lot of importance should be focused on for the family members to help support them in how to learn how to support their loved one. So I spend a lot more time working with family members who have loved ones with mental health and or addiction than I do working with someone with an addiction themselves in my private practice.
Well, I've actually found more of my audience the more I grow and I meet people is actually family members. And it's interesting because that's what I've done an episode with my mom, my sister.
I listened to those, yeah.
My girlfriend. I did 2 episodes with her. My good buddy. I've done one with a couple whose son died of an overdose.
Wow.
And so I've really had a lot of family members that aren't necessarily using alcohol or drugs, but their family members are. And that has been one of the biggest things. Everybody says you need to educate, because it's such a difficult thing to deal with and know how to deal with it.
And not only educate on what addiction is like and how it can impact, the body and the mind, but also to be able to educate on what the process of treatment looks like, because sometimes
what options are out there,
and then unfortunately, sometimes those that are in treatment themselves are not ready to have family integrated, either because of pressures, judgment, or they know their family well enough to feel or think that they will not participate maybe in a supportive way. So sometimes I think family gets kind of pushed on the back burner, sometimes for a short term or sometimes for the entire time someone's in treatment. And I just wish that family members could have more options to be integrated either in the treatment with their loved one, or which is starting to develop now, where there's, seminars or support groups for family members. But I wish there would be more of that. I'm hoping within time there will be more attendees and it will continue to grow.
I think there is. I did a podcast, I think just a couple episodes ago. He was a instructor of the recovery coach classes I was taking, so I drove up to Penfield, New York, and did an episode with him. And I loved how he said, and he's really, really focused on trying to shift the perspective to, because we just focus on the negatives of substance use, what we need to change.
Sure.
And there's a lot that does need to be changed. There's no doubt about that, but there's so much that has been changed. And he really just wants to just talk about more of that.
Makes a lot of sense.
Like, yes, we do have a lot of things we have to get going, and a long place to go.
Yep.
But let's talk about the things that have been great. And he really hammers home about just identifying people's strengths as opposed to picking out everybody's weaknesses all the time. And I think that's such an important thing because, I mean, that was something I had to do for myself as an individual and really work on was, I mean, in my mid-20s, I developed this introspective monster. So I just stopped watching sports and I just got into psychology and philosophy and all I found was this piece of shit human being that had a lot of things to work on. And I really had to try to develop self-compassion. And that's something it took me till probably the last 2 years to really start doing. Is, all right, you deserve to be loved, forgiven, accepted, and all of those other things. And that's something I, as a person, as an individual, am trying to push out there with just even this podcast and doing things like that. And I think it comes back to a lot of it is societal and such a lack of, I'm not good enough that is around. And it's so important, I think, to start really pushing everybody's good enough.
I love that idea of identifying the strengths more often. And you know what I think is really, really great is sometimes when I'm working with someone, and this goes even outside of my private practice, I don't feel that I get the opportunity to do it as much with friends or family, or maybe I'm just not as aware of it in my personal life outside of my practice. But I think to myself, or I ask my clients, that's how you describe yourself. How do you think your mother or your father or your significant other might describe your positive traits? Because it's very telling. It's telling in the sense of, can they identify what they think their loved one would identify as a strength of theirs? Would it be the same? And if you can bring in that additional party someday, what are the descriptors that person would identify for the client, if you will? And it can be really wonderful because we as people may never know how someone actually feels about us unless we ask and if they're telling us the truth. So what a great opportunity to be able to spend the time talking with family about how would they describe the strengths of those around them.
Which I think that's awesome, too, because half the time what we think other people think of us isn't even true.
Isn't that the truth?
Yes.
Yeah.
And
It's
I
really
love that.
amazing.
I think I'm trying to think of the Cooley, I think it was, the father of sociology, and he always had that quote,
Oh, wow.
I'm not, oh, come on, I'm going to screw it up.
I'm impressed with your quotes. I've listened to a handful of your podcasts, and you always pull one out. I'm like, wow. Now, where were you in that time when you came across that quote? That's what I think when you say those things, you know?
Oh, I did.
It's pretty impressive.
I did. I told you I developed this introspective monster, and all I did was read philosophy, psychology, mainly. I mean, Carl Jung is one of my favorites.
I'm sure you've come across the Socrates, the unexamined life is not worth living. That was one of my yearbook quotes.
Was it?
Yeah, from 2004. And it still applies to my life today, and I think that's really what kind of I think that really highlights the essence of therapy for me as a therapist is we are all so deserving to take the time to understand what life means to us and what we value and doing more of it. And I feel like we as people miss the mark on importance. Again, to your point earlier, those societal pressures, it really influences what should maybe be important to us when that's just reflected in like social media, Facebook and Twitter and Instagram.
Gosh, yeah.
And it's, most times we're posting only the positive things. So I always say if someone's more in like a depressed state or a depressed mood, stay away from the social media.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Because it can only bring us down if we're not really prepared to see only positive moments when we don't feel positive about, our life in those moments. But I think, just taking the time to identify what makes us feel good. So like for me, for example, listen, I like a date with a couch, okay? I like watching TV. I like getting all my snacks. I like being in my sweatpants as soon as I get home from work. It's doing more of those things that I look forward to. I started leisurely reading, and through a series of, books in a book club, I was able to identify the type of reading material that I liked. Never would have pegged myself for loving murder mysteries, but it's my go-to. And I love making time to do the reading or making a good meal or saving up to go out for a meal at a restaurant that I've been looking forward to. It's those small things that really excite the mind and bring comfort to the mind, whether we see it in the bigger picture or not, because it's all the smaller parts that equal the sum of our being.
That's a great point. I mean, a lot of people don't take time for themselves. And I mean, that's something I remind myself all the time. Is it's okay to put Netflix on and turn your brain off for a moment.
We need it.
Yeah,
it's imperative, actually.
And because you'll ruin anything you're doing, no matter how much you love it, if you don't make sure you do stuff like that. That's huge.
And it's okay to back out of commitments, and it's okay to not give an excuse for not committing to something either. I like to really put that point out there. Just because we said we're going to do something doesn't mean that it's the right time for us, and we owe no one an explanation other than ourselves.
I'm glad you say that because I'm in the middle of like shifting shifting part-time side jobs, and I have to drive some people to a rehab in Utica tomorrow morning.
Wow.
And I have to call this other place and be like, I can't come in, and I hate calling off. And I, and I know that this person's shorthanded, and I'm just like, oh, I've been dreading it to do it all day, and I'm just like, son of a bitch.
Well, listen.
And it is super important to...
It's super important, but listen, I got news for you. It's like... we have to do what's going to be best for us.
Mm-hmm.
And again, no one knows what we're going through unless we ask. And if we decide to tell them the truth about what's going on, by you rearranging that commitment, it's up to you to decide, what you want to share with that person. But I mean, end of the day, we have to do, what's best for us.
That's a fact. I agree. Yeah, and that's sometimes it's very hard for us to do. It's crazy as individuals that we want to say yes to everything, but then you end up forming resentments and getting angry.
That reminds me that, okay, I wanted to say something. I couldn't remember it, what I wanted to say, and that was drifting off, and then that just reminded me of it, and I'm forgetting it again. Oh my gosh, I can't believe that. I keep wanting to say this one thing, and then I keep forgetting. When you said you're dreading the call because you're feeling guilty, and I was going to say, I got news for you. What that to me means is that you care, and I hope that that in itself is enough for you to feel okay with canceling.
Yeah, and that's I was having that pep talk with myself on the drive here pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
I think so much we want to make sure other people think we care.
I think that's a great point. Mm-hmm.
And I think we do that a lot in our lives. But I'm just going to shift gears anyway.
Yeah, please.
And what made you kind of want to get into this field? Was it experience in your life growing up? Was it just wanting to help people?
Well, I'm sure a little bit of my, childhood upbringing had some type of influence, but I do have an answer, and I really enjoy sharing the answer. So there was a movie, I believe it came out in probably 1992 or 1993. It's called Harriet the Spy, and it's about a young girl who's in probably elementary or middle school who is having some problems at home, and her parents make her go see a therapist. It might have been a psychologist, actually, from the movie. But I watched the movie, and I was so impressed. And I was young. I was probably 10 years old. And I was so impressed that there was a job where you can be in a room, decorate it however you want, and have the trust of working with someone who may open up to you and share what's going on in their life. I was so impressed with having the opportunity of being that person who holds that trust for that person. It sometimes makes me emotional when I think about it and talk about it, but I just thought, wow, what an amazing feeling to know that you are that person, to be able to be that special person for that person, if that makes sense.
No, it totally makes sense. There's something, because that's one thing I love about just being a great listener and really just kind of talking with people about what's going on in their lives. And it's why I had to reteach myself how to do small talk again, because I would rather just not talk than to talk about nonsense.
Sure.
But there's something, just because it's just genuinity, authenticity, vulnerability, just the rawness of what every human being is. And you are there to share that moment with them. And there's something super, almost ineffable about it, because you're just somebody's pouring their life out to you.
And you know what? Sometimes the pouring of the life doesn't always happen as much as maybe someone would hope that it would when they come to therapy.
But
it
takes time. Yeah.
It does. And sometimes people don't always get there, but it doesn't mean that progress is not being made and that work is not being done. Because let me tell you something, you just thinking about going to therapy is the first step, and actually showing up is a whole new agenda, a whole new life that you have set before you.
That's huge. It is. Well, and there's such a stigma of you're weak if you go to therapy.
I just wish so bad I knew where that came from.
I know, it's so crazy.
I get mind blown sometimes, and mental health and addiction is being spoken about more publicly in the past year than it ever has, to my knowledge.
Yeah, no, it definitely is.
And I think to myself, where did this stigma begin? I know, generations and whatnot, but I just think to myself, with the global platform that we have now for social media, why is everyone's challenging the stigma with coming about and sharing their stories, but why are we still...
Why is it there?
Why is society still focusing on the stigma piece? Let's just embrace and accept the change.
Yeah, it's crazy. I would be interested to look up to see, was there a period of time where it wasn't there, and then something happened culturally that shunned it? And then it went hidden again? Or has it just always been very, very slow progression to like get to where we're at now, and just we got to talk about this. It's okay.
I can't help but think that, the psychiatric centers way back when in the day, would greatly influence our society's thoughts on why people are going for treatment. And we use different words now, too. Before, it was institutionalized.
Language is a huge thing that's getting
Absolutely.
changed all the time.
Institutionalized to treatment, to self-care. That's the new, and that is what should be used. That is what it is. You are taking care of yourself, making time for yourself to take care of yourself, which there's not enough of. So I really do think that stigma probably was associated way back when with the institutionalized and medications not being available yet to help treat symptoms, and the society back then not really understanding, the psyche, the normal psyche. So I think that that's where it came from.
Normal.
Yeah, hey, again, no pun intended. But I think overall, we're finally starting to make that movement, but gosh, it's slow, isn't it?
It is. It seems extra slow. I like to want to focus on the positive. There is a movement. Things are changing. Good things
Agreed.
are happening. People are talking about it, but it's so bizarre. Nobody says you're weak when you have the flu and you go to the doctor. That's perfectly fine. You're allowed to do that.
And when family members say, "Go to the doctor," why aren't you going to just go to the doctor? Or I hate to say it, and I don't really like to separate genders all the time, but I did just recently see an article that focuses on men's health and how men as they're aging are not going to the doctors for that yearly visit, and how when they miss the mark on the yearly visit, it really can have some significant effects if there's some, underworking developments of some medical conditions that could be caught early. So point is, our family members, or let's say, the spouse of that man may say, go to the doctors. You're not feeling well. You're feeling nauseous every night, or maybe they have a gluten, allergy. But it's so different. You're forcing and you're encouraging people to go to the doctor for their medical ailments, but it's shunned or quiet or not acknowledged when someone's not feeling themselves.
Yeah, when it comes to the psyche, you're right. It's like, nope, I'm weak, and you have to be stronger than that. It's funny because I have found in my life the psychological battle is always a million times more difficult than the physiological battle.
Sure.
I think even when coming off of my heroin addiction, I totally physiological part was easy. You suck it up for 3 or 4 days, maybe even 7. It's the mental part.
Sure.
That is the most difficult thing, and that's what I see people struggling with the most. It's not the physiological aspects of coming off a drug. It's the psychological aspects that are the most difficult, and it's why people can't stay clean, and a lot of people can't stay clean is
Agreed.
because of that, and that's a huge battle. And thank God we are starting to talk about it more, and it's okay to go to a therapist. It's
That's
okay
right.
to go to a psychiatrist. You're not weak for doing that.
That's
In fact,
correct.
it takes a lot more strength. Yeah, it takes a lot more strength to say, you know what, I need help with this, and to really show up and get somewhere as far as your battleground of mentality is concerned, because it's difficult.
That's right. Not only do we have to hold ourselves accountable, but it's also really important that we have other people in our lives to hold us accountable too. And I think that goes outside of family as well. I think about, having a job. If someone is employed, their motivation is to go to work to get their paycheck and maybe some experience, or they love what they do. But at the end of the day, our employer is actually holding us accountable to coming in so that we can get that paycheck. Because if we don't show up, we're not getting the paycheck. So in the bigger picture here is not only do we have to hold ourselves accountable, but we should also identify who those other people in our lives that should be, could be, and are actually holding us accountable.
Yeah, it comes back to, as I always, one of my big key points. I did a presentation at Horizon Village on like my 4 main points that have helped me stay clean and really just progress in my life. And one of them is vulnerability, and it's being open. I mean, to me, that's like the core, staying out of self-pity.
Sure.
And being vulnerable and open, because unfortunately I shouldn't say unfortunately, but it's the only way to really feel connection. And it's such like a paradox, because we don't want to be vulnerable and show our real selves because we feel like we'll be rejected. But the only way to ever completely, genuinely, authentically be accepted is if we are vulnerable.
Sure.
And it's this constant battle that we always hold up about, all right, what if they reject me? And then that's why it's another thing I try to practice, is just accepting everybody where they're at for who they are at that moment. And granted, times that can be difficult because people try your patience or you butt heads.
100%.
But it's so important, I think, for us as human beings, just accept everybody where they are. And not saying we don't honor the mistakes and the things that people need to change, but we need to accept people where they are. And so they can feel comfortable with saying, you know what, I'm not very good at this. Can you help me?
That's right.
And that's such a difficult thing to bring out of people.
Isn't it?
And I love like jobs like what you do. I think that's one of the most important jobs we have around nowadays is helping people with their mental health. I mean, that is for sure. Now, do you deal a lot with like kind of relationships? What do you see mostly the people who walk in here?
For me, most of the clientele that I'm working with are coming in with more short-term concerns, such as contemplating whether or not they want to leave their job and take a different job, contemplating whether or not they want to take some time off of work to take care of themselves, those that are contemplating whether or not they want to take that next step to actually getting married because the pressures of family and the partner.
Commitment.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really big deal, and I think it's an even bigger deal and such an amazing place to be in, to recognize that and to actually talk to somebody about it, because our family and our friends are going to be the number one influencer and pressure on whether or not we should be getting married. And it's really important to have a safe place to be able to talk out loud whatever you want without having to worry about somebody challenging that. And only us being ourselves and expressing ourselves will we begin to feel comfortable and know what it feels like to actually work towards fulfilling what it is that we need for ourselves. Like you were saying earlier, doing what people expect of us. Yeah, sometimes it's necessary, like job performance, which sometimes is even difficult to keep up with. And sometimes people miss the mark and don't even know that there are protections in place at the workplace that if you're struggling, that you can have help, whether it's, taking time off and you're protected by the Family Medical Leave Act and things like that. But at the end of the day, sometimes we get so caught up in the pressure of meeting the expectation, but we are all not meant to meet expectations. We are all good at our own things. We have our own strengths and our own weaknesses. And just because we're not good at something that we thought we should be doesn't mean that, we're not great at something else that somebody else isn't great at. That's what we have to remind ourselves. We have our own strengths for a reason, and we have our own weaknesses for a reason. And if we have our weaknesses and we seek out someone who has it as a strength, that can build a wonderful, long-lasting relationship.
That's huge. That's, I think, really what I always talk about makes, in quotes again, perfect relationship is obviously not the perfection of somebody, but two individuals who are working on themselves. They come together and help each other work on their flaws and become better people.
That's right.
I think that's how you find a great relationship. But I love that you deal with stuff like that, because it sounds so minuscule, but it is.
But
that's
it's
a
everything,
huge.
though.
It is.
It's your whole life.
It is, and shit, I should have went and seen some damn counseling before I got married.
Shouldn't we all, though? Not even if we're getting married or not, just in general.
Somebody would have told
just
me
even
never to do
communication.
that. Yeah.
That's another thing, too, that really comes in my way is how to better understand and communicate with significant family members. And I'm not talking about like partners, like a boyfriend or girlfriend. I'm talking about
mothers.
Yes, absolutely. Or coworkers. It's really interesting, but those what might seem like small things are the essence of our being in our daily life.
Can make things a lot easier. I mean, a lot of times you find yourself in an argument with somebody and you end up finally hours down the road realizing you both meant the same thing. And I love that. Like, you can do that so often just because of going back to language.
Yep,
and the
right.
language we use. And that's the thing. I always tell people that, like, language is obviously one of the most beautiful technological tools that, the human race has ever come up with.
Wow.
And
that's very well said.
Yeah, it's super beautiful, but at the same time, it's super limiting.
Sure.
Because
and damaging.
Yeah, and it can be. And it's just like sometimes like one word can carry so much weight and have so many different meanings that there's a miscommunication along this road, but you both are trying to achieve the same end result.
It's wild.
And
so
it's
true.
super wild. It's super weird. One of this ethnobotanist I really like, Terrence McKenna, always talked about the world
What
being...
kind of survey?
What's that?
What kind of
He's
survey?
An ethnobotanist.
I've never even heard of that word before. Tell me what that is.
He basically
I'm
works
like,
with...
is Sean speaking English?
He studies plants and their relation to human beings, pretty much.
I hope I remember that. They say you learn something new every day.
He was huge into hallucinogenic plants and stuff as well. But,
okay.
Yes,
okay.
but that's what I always say instead of like psychonaut or something. I just call him an ethnobotanist because it sounds much better. But he was just huge on saying the world is made of language. And I always loved that concept because really nothing would exist without language in our minds.
That's right.
Nothing would exist. But again, it's just so limiting and can really cause communication breakdowns when people don't know how to communicate correctly. So,
with long-lasting impact.
with that being said, what are some keys to communication?
Gosh.
You said you're in no rush, so.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because the word is patience. That's the first thing I was thinking of.
Okay.
I mean, when I think about communication, I think that you have to identify that there is a concern around that. And I think that's the first step. And then I also think, when I say patience, it's recognizing that it could be a lifetime of work of making changes within ourselves to better our relationships with other people. Doesn't mean that you're not going to have change right away or within, a few months or a year, but it's going to be a process for the rest of our lives. It's the same thing as taking care of yourselves, whether it's personal hygiene or going to your annual primary care doctor visit a year. You have to do those things on a regular basis to promote long-term health and change. So I think patience is huge. Willingness to try different things. I'm a huge advocate for if you have a cell phone, and you have a note section on your phone, when something comes up throughout the day, quickly pull up that note section, just jot down the date in your thoughts so that you can go back to it, whether it's 2 days or 2 weeks or 2 months later, to reference that, whether that's in therapy or for yourself. But yeah, I think of recognizing what you want different in both yourself and your partner. Patience, also thinking about, would you be willing to incorporate that person in your life into the therapeutic experience with you? And it doesn't need to be looked at as like a couples counseling. If it's a partner in your life, it can be, how can that partner be a support to you? And I think that's also really important when you're in therapy, is if you want someone to join, even on occasion, that therapist points out what is the agenda for that day, to make it clear to both the client and their supported person that day. There should be an agenda so both parties know what to expect, and to get permission from both parties that they're both willing to take part in that. And sometimes it can be difficult, so you also want to be able to acknowledge that too. If someone needs a break, that they can step out, or we can end early. And then you always want to close with, and what are we going to do when we leave here today? Are we going to talk about this at home, or are we not going to talk about this at home? It's all those little things that matter so much. Sometimes it's just thinking and processing about the session when you get home, and then coming back to talk about it. And if you are going to talk about it at home, identifying what parts are you going to be discussing, and when to know what the cutoff is, and when to know when to walk away when it's too much.
Because it can get overwhelming sometimes. And
Absolutely.
I love that. I love that. Like, are we going to talk about it or not talk about it when we leave here?
It has to be a joint decision.
Because I can picture that car ride home sometimes.
I know.
Oh my gosh.
I totally
I can't
agree.
believe you said that about me.
Hey, we're all human. Exactly.
We are, absolutely.
And that check-in with, do you agree with that? Does that sound right to you? Because it's also important for both parties to recognize and hear that participating support if they agree with it on both sides, because that can also be eye-opening in itself, not only for those two, but for the therapist to bring back and address later on.
Yeah, that's so huge. There's this clinical psychologist I love, and one of his books I just finished not too long ago, the chapter is called Be Precise in Your Speech. And he really goes on to talk about how when little issues come up that bother you, whether you're right or wrong, like you could be wrong for feeling it, or just totally misinterpret something somebody said, but to be precise in it, say, you know what, what you said, I don't understand it. What you said really hurt. And to say it and talk about these things immediately, because those little things, when not said, grow into something so much bigger. Sure. And that was always something that stuck out to me, because, I always use the analogy of, like, say, a husband cheating on his wife, and you at the end result, you just see a husband who cheated on his wife, what a douchebag. But at the same time, maybe he or she didn't say something that was bothering her a year ago, and because it didn't get brought up, she just kind of shut down, and their love life went to crap, and he just went to find acceptance somewhere else because he didn't want to bring it up either. And so when we're not communicating, so many problems, I find huge problems come from a little tiny problem that was never talked about.
I think that's well said. And just to kind of, further discuss that a little bit, not only if there's no communication do we not know what the other person's thinking, but it's not even necessarily that someone's going to seek out with intention what it is that they're missing. Sometimes gradually over time, it naturally occurs in itself. Sometimes if we're not getting along with someone in our lives, and we're working with someone day to day, side by side in our day job, and we get along with them, we start to recognize characteristics or traits about the person's personality that we admire or appreciate or want more of. And through our partners in ourselves, whether current or past partners, it's really important to reflect on, what did you enjoy with that partner? What would you want more of from that relationship, in your current relationship? And what would you want less of or not at all? All those things matter matter so much.
Oh my gosh, they do.
Mm-hmm.
Those are huge.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved when, the first point you brought up was patience and how to like take things slower and set kind of smaller goals of what you're going to do the next day. And I always think about the zone of proximal development by that Russian neuropsychologist, Vygotsky, I think his name is.
I'm
And
so impressed
he talks
with
about
your memory. It's really impressive.
I just repeat a bunch of stuff I read. I'm not really smart. And he talks
Give yourself
about
some credit.
he talks about just setting those small little goals each day and just and obtaining them and then going on, because eventually that's going to lead to this big goal. And I find a lot of times we get impatient and set this huge, gigantic, grandiose goal that we're never going to obtain, and we expect to obtain it in a week, and we don't come close, so we feel like a failure, we give up. And I think it's so important to set those small goals and have patience in relationships.
I totally agree. And that end result being just being better, feeling happier, having things to look forward to. The end goal should be for the rest of your life to achieve that. But one of my favorite analogies, I do not recall where it came from or who I heard it from, but in regards to patience and progress, one of my favorite analogies is in regards to working out. Someone commits to working out and they have an end goal, whether it's to tone up or lose weight or just to bring up, their cardio because their doctor told them to. When you start working out, you don't see results right away. But you feel them. You're in a lot of pain. But point being, with patience, just because you don't see the change doesn't mean it's not physically and mentally developing within time. And that workout analogy is it may take months before you see any type of change if you're trying to tone or you're trying to lose weight, but you can physically feel the difference in the pain in itself. So I think that takeaway is just because you don't see it yet doesn't mean that it's not in progress.
I love that analogy.
I wish I remembered who came up with it.
Working out is always a great analogy for a lot of things. But to mindfulness, because we're here in the moment.
Yes.
And we are talking about time, doing little things that can make your night sleep better. And I've found, ever since I've gotten clean over the last almost 2 years, I have absolutely found I used to hate sleep. I don't know why. I used to think it was a waste of time. I used to wish I never had to sleep. But now there's nothing better than a good night's sleep. That makes or break, doesn't make or break my day. It makes my day a lot easier when I get a good night's sleep. And I think mindfulness is probably the number one thing that has helped me sleep, is because my mind isn't racing now when I lay down.
Sure.
I haven't really thought too much about the bed and my pillows.
Yeah, that's more of that evening ritual as you're getting ready to actually lay your head down and go to sleep for the night. But there's also those other things too, like you were just mentioning. I mean, you have to also be mindful about what type of content are you exposing yourself within that hour before you go to bed. Listen, I love 48 hours, but I learned the hard way. Okay. You can't watch 48 hours before you go to bed, because then you'll be up all night thinking the worst things are going to happen. So I decided to cut that out and put some type of comedy or some low-key drama in my life at nighttime. Or my new favorite thing is I love to go on my phone, and for about a half an hour I like to play Words with Friends. If you know what that is, it's like a Scrabble game.
That one's been around for a while.
It has, and it's awesome.
That was one of like the original games.
I think it was the first game I ever had. But it calms down my mind. I know what to expect. It's easy. The thinking involved is very slim. Sometimes I have to pull up the dictionary app and see what this other person just lay down, because I've never heard the word before. But aside from that, it's really enjoyable, and it makes me feel at peace and relaxed to get ready for bed. And then I also like to make a point in regards to, if someone finds showering or taking a bath to be relaxing, that's equally as important, again, in regards to temperature, lighting, and sound. I like to really encourage people to identify if they're taking a bath, what is the type of lighting that they want. Candles can produce a lot more of a calming light than the actual bathroom light itself. Consider if you want music playing in the background, and if you do, you better identify if you want lyrics in that music or if you just want simple instrumental, because that can also really affect the way that we feel. Music is such a wondrous thing to have in our lives, but sometimes lyrics can really influence how we feel. So it's important to identify before you go to bed what type of song is going to make you feel most comfortable and relaxed. And then with a hot shower or a cool shower, which one do you prefer? Temperature is important, lighting's important, and then transition into what are you wearing, what pillow, what blanket, and then get ready for a good night's sleep.
Yeah, I like burning my skin off in the shower for some reason.
Or the scalding hot shower,
and then complain that my skin's dry and I have bad dandruff.
Yeah, I wonder why.
I love that music is such an awesome thing, because the other day, it was just yesterday, yesterday this song came on, and I was in a great mood. Not that it put me in a bad mood, but I just started like crying. I was like, oh my God, I'm just crying. I mean, even instrumental music sometimes can do
Can
that.
be moving.
And it is. It's very obviously important to. I don't recommend listening to System of a Down before you go to sleep. But I think that's
wild, yeah.
That's awesome. And I think, yeah, developing that routine before you go to bed, because that's something I see in the substance use world too, is, I mean, even I know people who have over almost a year clean who still really struggle to get to sleep.
Sure.
And to stay asleep when they get to sleep. And I really see that's an issue, and that's a problem in a lot of places. And I'm assuming most of the things I find that are prevalent in recovery are really just a normal human being thing. Sometimes they're accentuated because of, alcohol or drugs, but
well, yes,
I mean,
absolutely.
I really find a lot of people just have trouble sleeping because of our monkey minds going everywhere. And
oh, sure. We have a lot to deal with, whether it's work, family, life, finances. I mean, it is an endless, and take your pick. There's always going to be something on our mind. And the more we can train our mind and our brain to commit to some type of routine before bed, it will eventually start to pave the way for, more often than not, having a more peaceful transition to sleep.
That is huge. It's such a beautiful tool we have of thinking, but yet our biggest challenge as well.
Oh, it certainly is. That's right.
I always think of that like a pre-hominid species as out and about, and then we start to learn to, I should hang on to some of these berries and not eat them all right now because I need them for tomorrow. But then then that brings upon worrying, and then I think of like suffering and how so much majority of suffering is stuff that's never even happened.
Yes. Oh, yes.
It's
always.
never even happened, and our minds are just going crazy,
Worst
just
case
making
scenario.
I mean, when my brother and sister died when I was 15, it took me well over probably a decade to like realize it's not normal to think that your best friend is dead and you go into a funeral speech because he didn't answer his phone.
Sure. I think that's well said.
Yeah, and our minds really just make up this stuff sometimes. Like, what in the world is going on?
Really speaks to, though, how impactful our life experiences continue to, affect us every day and in different ways. And, I don't want to, you're human. So for that to happen, not every person's going to experience that. And that's how you can identify that, that was a problem. And it shouldn't be happening to you so often that every single time, someone hasn't answered the phone, that you go into that worry mode or that worst case scenario mode. And I hope as time's gone on that your brain's been able to challenge itself to kind of put the worry down a little bit and just kind of go into more of a realistic, hoping that it's reasonable to think, maybe their phone's just on silent, or their appointment went over,
or they just don't feel like talking.
And that too.
That's another one.
Isn't that the
truth?
truth?
My gosh. Yeah, I remember like, oh wait, this isn't normal to think this. Okay. So, but I guess my point of bringing that up is that our minds are so insane, and we bring so much suffering upon ourselves because we can't just learn to be here now, as Ram Dass would say.
Yes, that's right.
And I think that's so important. And
being in the present.
That is something I think everybody would benefit from practicing.
Agreed.
That is a fact. And I have to comment again on the BU, and I'm going to grab this. Hold on.
Yeah, go ahead. So how would we describe that to the audience?
I love this. So it just, whatever. It says BU, and then it has this twisty thing up there. So it says wholeheartedly BU, unapologetically BU, 100% BU, courageously BU. And I love that because it was on your video on your website.
Yeah.
And I love it because those are huge, huge tips for people to be able to feel connection. And I think that's so difficult for us. Once again, because of that, if I'm 100% me, if I'm courageously me, if I'm wholeheartedly me, if I'm unapologetically me, is somebody going to reject me? And it's such a big fear that we have as human beings. We're always so worried about being rejected that it keeps us from connecting, but it also is the only way we can connect is when we are wholeheartedly ourselves. And so I love this thing. So if it's gone when I leave, you'll know I took it.
I think I got that at Hallmark. So if it's gone, I'll know where to get another one.
Or you can just call the cops on me. Wouldn't be the first time. No,
I would be, that would be a compliment if you took that, so I wouldn't do that.
Really? I hope that somebody says that about their purse when I stole it when I was in the middle of a heroin addiction.
You know what?
They must have really liked my purse.
You never know. You never know.
Oh my gosh, that is awesome. Well, other than the damn technological problems, this has been a great podcast. I feel like I'm gonna have to keep having you back.
I would love that.
So
I
since
love
you've
this.
enjoyed it so much, and the way I've seen you react to my technological problems, you're a good guest to have on.
Oh, good, good.
But I'll end with you, and I haven't ended with this for a while, which is surprising because I always try to get people's like main mission statement of life, I guess, for lack of a better term, out of them. Like if you had that last opportunity to share something with whether anybody, especially struggling with mental health, like what would that be? What would you say to people?
It's something that I say often to myself, to very important people in my life, and to as many people that I have the opportunity to say it to. And it is, we cannot be our best for others unless we are our best for ourselves. And that again goes back to that mindfulness of, giving us permission to put ourselves first. Because if we don't put ourselves first and we're not healthy for ourselves, then how can we expect to take care of others? Whether that's a partner or children, family, or friends. So that's what I would like to share with everyone.
I love it. Self-compassion.
Yes.
Self-care is so important. So important. And people get sick of people saying that. Like, how can you love somebody if you don't love yourself? But when you really get down to the essence of it, you can't. It's so impossible to continuously love other people and care for other people if you are not doing that for yourselves. Because I've always had this gentle heart. I've always had an empathetic heart. I've always wanted to help people, but I really was never doing that. Now, I'm not saying there weren't times in my life where I helped somebody, because there were so many that I can think of, but to like find like what I'm doing now and just for a living, I'm out there trying to help people. That's like what you do. You're out there constantly helping people. And I wasn't able to give that 100% until I learned how to do that for myself.
Sure.
And I think that's such a huge thing. You can see bits and pieces of it, of helping and loving and caring for people, but you can never give it a full 100% when you're not doing that for yourself.
Oh, I absolutely believe that.
And I think that's huge. And thank you very much for having me in your office.
Thank you for reaching out to me. This was a wonderful experience and wonderful surprise. And I love being able to, discuss life, and anything that comes up in this podcast I thought was really great.
Yeah, I'll definitely have to have you on, because those are my favorite discussions too. Life, whatever that is. There's so many topics. I can't get enough of it. So I will stay in touch with you for sure.
Yes, please do. I would love that.
I'm going to get a new interface, and I'm going to come back here, and we are going to do one without any interruptions.
Hey, if there's interruptions, I'll roll with it. That's totally
Although
fine.
you were awesome, because it's sometimes those interruptions can like ruin the flow of things, but you jumped right back in it. It was like,
Yeah,
great.
it's fun.
Yeah, you were
I
on
like
top
it.
of it. I had a blast doing it with you, so we
Me
will have
too.
to continue these episodes. I like having people on multiple times, because I can like listen and hear my relationship with them grow, and
Sure.
the conversations flow and different topics. And
Yeah, like for example, I wish we ran out of time, because when you had mentioned about stealing the purse, and you kind of made a joke about that. You hope that they were as forgiving. I would love to be able to talk more about that too, because that's your brain feeling bad and feeling guilty about it and remembering that way, but it doesn't mean that person didn't have a positive outcome from that too. But we'll never know if we never speak to them and if we never get that opportunity. But that could have been a life-changing moment for that person in ways that we would never understand.
that's very true. And I think I wrote a blog called My Paradoxical Addiction, and it talks about all the I kind of talk about all the messed up things I have done in my addiction, and how like screwed up it was that I stole from a 13-year-old girl, and just so many unbelievably terrible things that I did. But I look at it and I tell people like, but I wouldn't be the amazing man that I'm becoming if it wasn't for those lessons. If I didn't have to sit in jail for 6 weeks,
Sure.
if I didn't have to go to a rehab and really just be forced to spend that time on myself, and like, all right, Sean, you got to figure out how you're going to care for yourself. And I wouldn't be doing these awesome things right now. I'd still be cooking in the kitchen, walking in there with that empty feeling of, I got to be doing something more than this. So
Well, it's very insightful.
yeah, I'm very thankful you brought that up, the stolen purse thing. So you hear that? Anybody I stole from, you're not allowed to be angry, and you have to learn something from it. I'm just joking. All right, Brittany, thank you so much.
Okay,
You
Sean,
are
thank
awesome.
you. Look
All
forward
right.
to meeting again.
All right, bye.
Take care.
Alright. That was a great episode. Brittany is an awesome, awesome human being. I hope you guys loved this episode as much as I did. And thank you for listening, as always. And once again, if you want to check out Brittany's stuff, you go to botwservices.com and see what she has to offer, people. So get on the website and check this stuff out. Get on room9podcast.com and check our stuff out. And have a great week. Much love. Look forward to an episode with my 12-year-old coming up. So I'm excited about this one. I'm going to sit down with him soon. And I'm not totally sure when I will release it, but you guys will be sure to know. It'll be kind of a shorter episode. I might do like a midweek thing. Obviously, we're not going to sit down and have a conversation for 45 minutes to an hour or whatever. So we'll see. Anywho, love you guys. Room9podcast.com. Check us out on Facebook. Share us. Get on our contact page. Help us spread the message, whether you share our Facebook, social media stuff, or if you want to help out monetarily, room9podcast.com/support. You can give one time, you can give monthly, and let's get this message going. Let's keep it out there. Keep the love coming. You guys are the best, and much love.